Native Americans are one of the most dramatic and tragic examples of unequal education in the United States. A report released by the White House in 2014 marks education historically as a tool for colonialism, their purpose being sort of twofold here. One, to achieve the seizure of land of indigenous peoples, and the second being the imposition of culture, of European and Euro-American culture on Native Americans. And this took place via boarding schools established by the Civilization Fund Act in 1819 by Congress, in which Native American youth are removed from their communities, their languages, their cultures, their families, in order to be assimilated into Euro-American culture. And this is just one of a couple of pieces of legislation that are really important to understand in order to understand how we arrive at the education system that exists today for Native Americans. Another piece of legislation being the Indian Reorganization Act, which encourages self-governance and self-determination on behalf of the of Native American tribes in organizing the education system. And this sort of ends up being flawed because of another piece of legislation known as the Johnson-O'Malley Act, also passed in 1934, which designates a lot of federal funds to education systems for Native Americans living off of reservations. So in this case, the self-governance and self-determination encouraged by the Indian Reorganization Act sort of isn't able to really take place due to that lack of funding, or the funding that's only given to Native Americans living off of reservations. And it's not that the U.S. government hasn't recognized these issues. They've actually released historically a couple of reports which have investigated this inequality, one of the first being the Miriam Report, released in 1928, which recognizes the failure and the harm caused by this assimilation in these boarding schools. In 1923, the Commissioner of Indian Affairs, John Collier, released a statement declaring that the Indian Affairs Council is sort of a disgrace, and that it has been perpetuating this inequality. And one of the second reports being the Special Senate Subcommittee on Indian Education in 1969, which credits a lack of tribal input, a lack of funding, inadequate infrastructure and resources as some of the causes of this inequality in education for Native youth. The lasting scars of this are evident. There's a 67% high school graduation rate for American Indian and Alaskan Native students. Native kindergartners are held back at 2 times the rate of their white peers, and Native students score sufficiently lower on standardized tests. 17% of Native American 8th graders are considered proficient in math compared to the national average of 40%. This inequality exists on pillars that have been built over the past 2 centuries. These are marked as insufficient funding, lack of Native cultures and languages in schools, difficulty recruiting and retaining skilled staff, lack of comprehensive student support, and exclusion of tribes from all these matters.